Before we get started with the next feature, I thought it'd be a good idea to upgrade our version of Laravel to the latest patch release, because there's a few changes that will allow us to simplify some of our code base. So why don't we head over to our terminal and run composer update to pull in the latest version of all our dependencies. And now that that's done, let's clear our terminal and run our test suite first to find out if there's any issues. Oh, and it looks like we get an error very quickly right away. So we have our from helper, which you might remember us implementing on our test case class, that makes it easy for us to test when something should redirect back to the previous URL. We're getting an error here that must be public because it's defined as public in the parent class, which is interesting because previously Laravel didn't have a method like this, and now it does. So Laravel actually ships with a from method that behaves the same way as ours did out of the box now. So we can actually head over to our test case class and delete our from helper, which is pretty cool. So if we delete that method and head back and run the tests again, everything is still green. So that's one less piece of code that we have to worry about maintaining ourselves. There's two other things I want to look at that Laravel now includes out of the box that we can delete from our code. The first one is up here. You might remember we added this macro to the test response called assert view is. I'm not sure exactly when this got added to Laravel core, but it is in Laravel core now, so we can actually delete this macro completely and run the tests again and make sure that things are still working. And they are, so we're good to go. Pretty awesome. The final thing, which is something that we've used a lot throughout this course, is our disable exception handling method. So Laravel actually added this to core when 5.5 came out, but we've still continued to use our custom one up until now. I'd like to do the little bit of work necessary to use Laravel's built-in version of this so we don't have to maintain this code ourselves anymore. Now the main difference is that Laravel's version is not called disable exception handling, it's called without exception handling. So you might think that the best thing to do here is just do a find and replace throughout our code base and replace disable exception handling with without exception handling, and that's probably a valid approach and might end up totally working. But I think a more controlled way to do this refactoring is actually to just comment out our implementation here and delegate to the new version from our method here. So if we do without exception handling in the implementation of disable exception handling, let's just make sure that everything still passes. And here we're kind of changing our implementation in one place instead of doing a find and replace throughout the whole code base. So if this ends up passing, we'll know that we can actually just straight up replace every instance of disable exception handling with without exception handling. So let's run the tests again. And it looks like we're passing, so we're in good shape. So before we delete this method, let's do a find and replace in our tests directory, looking for disable exception handling, and we'll replace that with without exception handling. So we'll do a replace here. It looks like we have 20 occurrences to replace across 9 files. So let's replace all of those, save all of those files, and now we can delete this method and run our tests again and just verify that that change did in fact work as expected. And it does, awesome. So now we're updated to the latest version of Laravel 5.5, and we're able to remove 3 custom test helpers from our code to now rely on what's built into Laravel, which makes the maintenance burden for us a little bit easier. In the next lesson, we'll start on a brand new feature.